Greeting, metal friends. Welcome back to my channel. And today I have got a very special interview for you on a topic that's very close to my heart, and that is mental health. I'm joined by James Neeson, who is author of Mental Health for Metalheads, Rock Your Way to Wellbeing. So, welcome, James. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, just to start, just give us an overview of your kind of own mental health struggles and how you came to write this book.
So I've been struggling with my mental health since childhood. Um, Particularly, I think with a lot of people, it gets worse in adolescence. And then, when you're an adult, you're trying to live with it while also trying to be an adult at the same time. So, it's been you know, it's been there for basically as long as I can remember. Um, I was the kind of person who tried to hide it and not get diagnosed and not get treated and try and push through, etc. But thankfully, when I got married, my wife talked me into going to the doctor and getting meds and going to therapy and reading self-help books and all that good stuff. And um, it's been nothing short of life changing. So yeah, would recommend to a friend 5 stars.
So, as you went through your own mental health journey, you were making notes about things that you found that helped you personally, lots of different areas of treatment and support, and that formed the basis of your book, didn't it?
I've always been like a one for like Amazon reviews or writing blogs about bands I like or concerts I go to, etc. And it was just kind of the same premise of like, oh, I must make a note of that. That's a really good grounding skill, or like, oh, I must make a note of it. That's a really good way of thinking about things, etc. And like I just started making notes on my phone for myself, and then I thought like this could be a good blog, or oh, I should share this with someone on social media. They might like it, and eventually I just spiraled and spiraled into writing a full-on book, which was never a plan. It just sort of organically happened that way.
And why did you think the world needed a kind of heavy metal themed book?
For absolutely years, I almost refused to get help or even acknowledge that I could be helped or anything. Um, but I'm an absolute, dyed-in-the-wool, unapologetic lifer for heavy metal, and I would buy a cookbook if it had like a Metallica logo on it, kind of thing. You know, um, I'd buy a clock if it had a Slayer logo on it. So when I started this whole mental health thing, the whole recovery process, for want of a better word, it just struck me like, if somebody had have made like a heavy metal version of this self-help book, I would have bought it, 20 years ago and saved myself 2 decades of, uh, not being better. And then, I had a quick Google around, and, it wasn't a product that existed. And I thought, well, if no one else has made it yet, I'll have to make it. Like, and that was kind of it. It was just like this should exist. No one has made it exist yet. Well, then I'll make it exist. Interestingly, about 80% of the way through, I actually found out someone else released a book on the same topic. Andrew Rossetti did a Mosh Pits to Mindfulness, and it come out like right as I was like finishing mine, which I felt a bit like, oh, but then also I was like, oh, actually no, cool. Now we have like a scene, and there's like I'm sure you will be aware of because of your Raven Records London mental health meetings, but there's a group called Heavy Metal Therapy, um, and a psychologist from that group, Dr. Kate Quinn, you know, she's writing on a similar topic, and I was like, ah, brilliant! Like that, there's more of us now. And now it's not just Papa Roach. It's Alien Ant Farm, and and then me coming to as edema or something. um, but yeah, I actually managed to get Dr. Kate Quinn to do an afterword for my book as well. So, um, you know, teaming up.
Who is the book for? Is it for only for people that are in the depths of despair or have a diagnosis, or is it for somebody that's just struggling a little bit? How did you kind of pitch the book?
It's based on a kind of coaching model of every individual is different. Everyone has different needs and abilities, even down to physically, like some people may not be able to hear or see, may not have fingers, etc. So there are thousands upon thousands of things in the world that have been designed to improve your mental health, but not everyone is accessible to every individual. And so the book kind of focuses on you making choices that are right for you, and it covers the whole spectrum from a little bit unwell to rather unwell to quite unwell, and also to people who are not unwell yet but are either supporting someone who is unwell or who may be predisposed to being unwell in the future, genetically, or if circumstances happen to them. No human being is immune to poor mental health, just as no human being is immune to poor heart health or poor gut health.
Mhm.
So all of the like a lot of the things in the book could prevent you from becoming more mentally unwell, or make you more resilient should you become mentally unwell in the future. But also, if you are at your lowest, there's a lot of stuff in there to help you, start rebuilding, start overcoming, start on your, I don't want to say healing journey because it's an overused phrase, but mental health isn't just like, I am completely fine and happy go lucky and whistling a happy tune, or I'm institutionalized, so you can go from, like feeling 60% terrible to only feeling 30% terrible, and
Mhm.
that's still a huge impact on your life. Um, and the book kind of stresses, don't try and think too much in binary, like, I haven't completely cured this. Sometimes there is no cure, but if your life is notably easier, better, if you're more resilient, then that's still a huge boon.
Course. And also, I think, there's so much, unfortunately, there's still so much stigma about mental health and lack of education surrounding it. And I think your book would be a really useful tool for somebody who was struggling to show to a friend or a family member to help them understand what they're going through, because, it's just not on to say, oh, stiff upper lip,
Yeah,
pull yourself out of it. Those things actually they don't work, and sometimes they can actually make you feel worse because you don't really feel that somebody is seeing you and really hearing you and what you're going through. So I think your book is wonderful for anybody, as you said, who's, just feeling a little bit unwell, right through to people that are really, really in the depths of despair, but also, to help educate family members and friends in order to help them support that person who's struggling.
brilliant. Thank you for saying so. Like, the only stiff upper lip I'm interested in these days is the AC/DC, album of the same name. Yeah, so one thing that was really important to me with this book is validation and empathy. So when I was like at my absolute worst, I accidentally stumbled upon a YouTube channel while Googling like anger management tips, um, by this brilliant psychologist called Dr. Scott Eilers. More on him in a minute. But his whole angle was that he, wasn't just an expert, he also had been there too. He was the patient as well. And the way he explained what it feels like to be mentally ill was like the first time I ever felt seen.
Oh,
I really identified with it. I was like, yes, yes, that's the thing. And it was really important to me, when doing this book, to try and have a bit of that too. I want people to feel seen. You there's so many misconceptions and negative stereotypes about what it feels like, and even some of the really good and helpful, useful things, like the black dog and that kind of thing. They're good, but um, they're not detailed and they're not like visceral enough. Um, so I wanted to inject a bit of like almost too honest honesty into it. So that's like you say, if someone is feeling that way, they can go, "Oh my God, someone else feels like that." But also, like you say, if someone was supporting someone who felt like that, they'd be like, "Ah, I didn't realize." Actually, the lady who read the book um, had a family member who was experiencing mental illness, and like they were just proofreading it for me, like they weren't using it as a actual self-help book because it was their job, but they said like, I never understood why that person did this. I never understood why that person said this or felt like this. And that was really affirming to me. I was like, it's it could be, rather helpful to the, like you say, to the caregivers as well.
Well, definitely. And I think, certainly in the opening chapters, you are very open about your own vulnerabilities and the depths that you sank to yourself. And I so commend you for that honesty and transparency, and that you've come back from it is incredible. And I think, in mental health, it's important to understand that showing vulnerability isn't a weakness. It's a strength because you're acknowledging that you need help. And until you, in your own mind, accept that you are helpless and that you need support and help, then you're not going to reach out or seek resources to help you. So I do commend you for it was very visceral, that's a good word. The opening chapters, I just kind of had tears welling up in my eyes at some point. And also that, you're a nurse, and that in your job, I think you have to be so mentally resilient. um, I just can only imagine that that put even more pressure on your mental health as well. So, it's very powerful what you've written, and how you've set the book out. And I love that you incorporated kind of metal themes and metaphors and analogies and lyrics, and there was almost like little Easter eggs you could spot throughout the book.
Yeah.
Um, you know, did that kind of give it another kind of dimension to the book, that you had all of this metal kind of bits, I guess, ideology going through it?
Yes. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all those things. It's like massive compliments I wasn't expecting. So thank you. With regards to the metal, yeah. So there's no point in this book existing without the metal. There are, a thousand psychologists, psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses, everything who have already made amazing and helpful self-help books, therapies, YouTube channels, podcasts. Um, like the only reason for this book to exist is to signpost that stuff to metal fans and to make that stuff accessible to metal fans.
Hmm.
You know, I kind of wanted to, yeah, like I use this analogy in the book, but it's kind of like the greatest hits, or like a playlist of the best of the world of self-help. But maybe, like those pop goes punk, albums where they'll cover Britney Spears, but like in a pop punk or emo style. It's kind of like that. It's covering the best of self-help, but for heavy metal fans' tastes. Um, so Easter eggs was a big thing. So every chapter is named after a metal album, band, or song. Every subheading is. There's also ones just hidden in the text, which is just something I've always did, even back in high school. Like I remember writing about nuclear assault in my GCSE history exam, or I remember, before all the allegations, I remember doing my Irish GCSE about Marilyn Manson. So I
Wow.
just can't help myself. But yeah, I thought it's just helpful to identify with something. I feel like you'll get more out of it. Do you know, you might see a charity that's like um, a support group for Asian women with schizophrenia, and like if you are an Asian woman with schizophrenia, it's like good that there's similar people to me in this group. I identify with it. I'll get more out of this group. Where if it's just like a group for people with a mental illness, any, and you don't necessarily identify with everyone. Um, so with that, like with the culture of heavy metal, um, I just thought like instead of explaining it the same way that seven other self-help books have already did really well, I'll try and do it in my own terms. So just as a random example, um, a big theme when you do actually start looking after your mental health is the theme that you are not alone. Um, and your mental illness makes you feel like you're alone. Like it tells you don't tell anyone, don't admit it. You'll get fired if you have a job, you'll never get a job if you don't have a job yet, etc. It tells you your partner will leave you if you have a partner, or you'll never get a partner if you don't have a partner yet, etc. Um, so like the nature of the mental illness makes you feel alone and isolated. And a lot of self-help media, like the first chapter will always start off with something along the lines of "you are not alone." So just to translate that into a metal context, I'm like, do you ever go to like a small village and there's just like no metalheads around? Like if you live in one of those small villages and you're dressed in like full on, battle jacket Slayer t-shirts, or, full goth or emo, makeup, hair, etc., you'd feel like you're the only one. You'd feel really unusual. You'd start to be uncomfortable. There's no one like you in the street. Like, is everyone going to be hostile? But when you go to Download Festival, or, Welcome to Rockville in America, or Sick New World or something, everyone is like that. And actually, every one of these villages has five or six little people feeling like they're alone. Then you go to the city and there's like, a couple of thousand people and so forth. So like when they're all in one place, you're like, wow, look at the field in front of the Download headliner, and like, wow, there's so many people like me. Like I can connect to people like me. I'm not the only one. Um, so I just thought like it's like that with mental illness. Like when you're alone in your, you know, home, not acknowledging that you know that you need help. You're like, there's something wrong with me. I'm so messed up. I'm so weird. Why am I like this? But when you actually, start working on your mental health, and it's like, oh, actually, so many people experience this as well, and it's not just me, and it's okay, and it's normal, and
I do think it's interesting because metal music typically has fairly dark themes and lyrics, but there's research to show that people that listen to hard rock and heavy metal, it does help improve their mental health. And I think that being part of the kind of metal tribe, metal music can be a solace to you. If you are feeling down, it can lift your spirit. But also, I think a lot of it is about the community around it, with like-minded people. But also, and perhaps most importantly, I think being in a community that's non-judgmental, that's supportive, um, it can help you feel fully self-expressed. And I'm sure you would agree with me, James, that feeling that you're able to be fully self-expressed and your authentic self, that's really good for your mental well-being.
definitely, so much. Um, yeah, I think that one of the reasons like I ended up becoming like such a fan of metal in the first place was that, it gives voice to like emotions and thoughts and feelings that you know mainstream society would rather you know not give the voice and feeling to.
Mm.
You feel represented. I'm sure like a lot of people have came into the music through the either the album artwork or the song titles or the band names, representing things about them that you don't get elsewhere on, the Great British Bake Off or whatever. No shade on the Bake Off. My wife is a massive fan. We watch it every year, so that's not. But yeah, I think it's it's been very, it's been a very positive force in my life, like an area of special interest. It gives me joy. It it takes up your time. It occupies you on thoughts of, which is the best, Judas Priest album, instead of like maybe I shouldn't be here, or it helps you in a multitude of ways. And like you say, the community, like I think every very close friend I've had in my life since the age of about 10 has been a rock or metal fan. It's, they're the people I want to be with. They're the people who are on my wavelength. They're, the people I can converse with. Not even just about metal, like the person who edited the book, the editor, I guess, for want of a better word, of the book. My best friend Paul is also, a huge lifelong metal fan. He has a podcast called The False Face. Um, Cheap plug, but um, it's not just like we only talk about metal all the time. It's anything. Your kids, TV, music, cooking, you know. But if they're a metal fan, they're probably on a similar wavelength. We'll probably have similar opinions about lots of things, from you know, lifestyle, politics, health, food, anything. Usually that they'll probably be a friend of mine. It's like that Manowar lyric: "If you are not into metal, you are not my friend."
Now, the book is non-linear in the sense that you don't have to read it from the first chapter to the last chapter. You actually designed it so that people could just drop in and out and pick the chapters that related to them at what they were going through at that particular moment. So you would be happy just for somebody to have the book and just use it as a guide and a kind of signpost, just as and when they needed it, really.
It's not a novel. It's not Lord of the Rings. You don't need to know what happens in chapter one to know what happens in chapter
Mm.
15, etc. Um, but they're all arranged by um, topics or themes of different areas you can work on, with yourself, or different aspects of mental health you can learn about. But there are so many mental health conditions in the world, and even amongst that, no two people are the same. Two people with even something as common and ever present as like anxiety. No two people with anxiety have the same anxiety, and it doesn't affect them the same way. There's similarities, there's overlap, just like, there's lots of people who are metal fans, but not everyone has the exact same CD collection. It's um some people don't have Sleep's Holy Mountain, and some people do. So the important thing is like the book is not a textbook where you must do this. Every single person who has ever had depression has to do this. It's all about exploration and finding the bits that work for you. Um, so if you don't have any problems with anger, you don't need a book on anger management. But like a lot of people who have panic attacks, that can manifest as, extreme anger on the build up to or come down from or even during, etc. So, and a lot of people with depression, for example, have you ever heard the saying like depression is anger turned inwards? It's not actually 100% true, but there's like a percentage of truth to it. And sometimes when you stop turning that anger inwards, you have a hard time controlling not turning it outwards, etc. So, some people are going to need a chapter on anger management. Some people aren't. So, you can skip that one if you don't need it. But what I've tried to do is just like in a playlist, etc. Like if you have a playlist of like the 100 greatest metal songs, and for some reason you don't want to hear Ace of Spades, just skip that one, but you can
Mhm.
still listen to the rest of the playlist.
Now, I noticed the book also has some practical elements. There's exercises at the end of each chapter. I think what I found really interesting was you also give suggestions of things that people can do in their darkest hour, if you want to call it that. And many of them are to do with being outdoors, being communing with nature. I personally find that very helpful. I love open water swimming. I think it does amazing things for my mental health. But each person can find the thing that helps them. Um, Whatever it is, I think it's so important that there's no judgment, only kind of validation. And I think that means that there needs to be more education around mental health. Do you think the book ultimately provides a kind of roadmap to long-term sustainable well-being?
That's definitely the goal. Like medicine, don't want to do it down. It's absolutely life-saving, and necessary for a lot of people. But for some people, like it won't help as much. For some people, it won't help, you know, much at all. Everyone's individual.
Mm.
Um, a lot of studies have shown that, medication is best in combination with other things. If you just take a pill, it won't solve your life, and oftentimes it's not just something that's happening in your body. It's also something that's happening in your environment. It's something that's happened in your past. It's how you're relating to other things. So like the medication is one, it's the bassist, but you also have a guitarist and a drummer and a keyboard player and whatever else, to work on. With the book, it's there are things for, short term, like I feel anxious right now, what can I do? And there are stuff, there are elements for longer term, like how do I become a person who is less constrained by anxiety in the first place. There are things for, you know, depression and low motivation, like how do I get going? And, short term, as well as things of like how do I structure my life, around things that will, energize me, motivate me in general, and kind of inoculate me from further, going down the spiral. So yeah, it's there's definitely the message of the book is that, it's a lifelong process.
Mhm.
And, if you can just do something to get 1% better today, do it. And if that's all you can do, you're still 1% better. That is awesome. That is better than being 100%. 99% is better than 100% unwell. Um, but, you know, as you add each thing, as you get 1% better 5 times, then
It's
you've got
cumulative.
5%.
Mm.
Yeah, you've got 5% capacity to add something bigger and so forth. And, you can chip away at it, adding more and more things, building a, healthier, more sustainable life, um, that's worth living and that makes you happy.
Well, you are an example of that, James, because you've come through some very, very challenging times. So just to wrap this up very quickly, because we're running out of time, what are you most proud about the book?
The teamwork. So, it's not one person making a book on their own. It's, a collaborative effort with many people. Like I've got an afterword, from the CEO of Metalheads Against Bullying. Um, from a psychologist from Heavy Metal Therapy, a foreword from the aforementioned Dr. Scott Eilers, who absolutely amazingly, agreed to contribute a forward to it, even though he's my hero. That's like, it'd be like you getting Ozzy Osbourne on the show kind of thing. Um, and the front cover is painted by Ed Repka, who did like Peace Cells and Rust in Peace and
Mm,
Leprosy and Scream Bloody Gore. Um, my great great friend from high school, John Cowan, who is the artist 1024 on Bandcamp and Instagram, etc. He did all the internal illustrations, etc. Um, I've had it. I got it test read from Mike Lodano from the Grab a Stack of Rock podcast, or well, YouTube series. So it's, yeah, the thing I'm proud of is the teamwork, and it's all for a good cause because it's 50% of the profits go to the Sophie Lancaster
yeah,
Foundation, who
yeah,
anyone who watches your channel will be aware of.
yeah. Wow. Well, that's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. The book is available on Amazon.
Great,
And I'm so glad that we've had this chance to talk, and that I can help you bring awareness of the book because it is a topic that deserves more attention. So thank you, James, for all your work on the book. And I love that you sprinkled all your little metal Easter eggs throughout this interview as well, because that really chimes with the book. So all the
I can't
best.
help myself.
And I will put a link to the book on Amazon underneath this video. So
Thank you
thank you
very
very much for
much.
joining me.